Today we are going to be fixing a PS4 Slim HDMI port. The ports for these are for the PS4 Slim and the PS4 Pro. Both use the same style, so if you're looking to buy the parts for that, that's what you need to look for. Alright, so we got to take this guy apart. It is a PS4. It is a Slim. First thing you do, take that little Torx, security Torx screw out of there. And then you can start taking the console apart. What we're going to be doing, and then you pull the side off of there, and a Phillips will get you into the hard drive to remove that one screw, removes the hard drive. Then you can pull it out of the side. So what we're going to be doing is actually taking this thing down to the motherboard. So we need to completely disassemble it. There we go. That's the hard drive. Just yank her out. It's got that little purse strap you pull on and you can get it out. Alright, so the next thing is we need to take the top and bottom cover off. The top pops up off the back. Oh, looks like I'm doing the bottom first. Okay. Bottom does something very similar. I'm doing it backwards, but I'll get it. There you go. You got it. Alright, and then you pry on the side there. Sorry it took so long. I was looking for a tool and I didn't see it. Alright, so that's how you get the top off. The bottom is very similar. But first we're going to go ahead and get these screws out. They are also they're smaller size of the Torx. We want to remove these two and this heat shield. Now when you take this heat shield off, you need to make sure that you notice that the screws on either side are different lengths, so you don't want to mix those up. One is significantly longer than the other. It has a special hole it goes in, so make it return to that same one. Alright, and then you take this middle one out, which is actually going down into the motherboard retaining shield underneath. And then there are two screws here that actually holds the power supply in, which is what that is underneath. That whole black area is the power supply. You can take this off if you want. You don't have to. You really only have to take those three first ones off of there, and then you can pop that guy up and off. And obviously there's a little bit of cleaning to do. Alright, so the motherboard we're trying to get to is right underneath this metal bracket here. There are quite a number of screws. There are three types of screws as well. So what I like to do, first what I like to do is get the ribbon cables off of there. Those two just pull. That one has a retainer clip. You pull up like I'm doing there, and you pull it out. And the final one is just a straight pull out, kind of wiggle it as you go. But don't yank on any of them too hard because they are fragile. So, three different types of screws. What I actually like to do is go through and mark them with different color markers. So all the black ones are getting a little black beside of it. You can do this in a number of ways, but this is how I like to do it. Then you can just make piles of each screw, type of screw rather, and not have to do a layout of it. See, that one's a different kind. So that one is going to get a different color. So you just go ahead and you go and you get all these screws out, and then you can lift the motherboard out. There I'm marking the second type of screw with a little blue mark. And going through and getting all the rest of the screws out of here. It's not quite as many as the PS5, which has a crazy amount, but it still has quite a few screws. I didn't count, but there's at least 20 of them. Different sizes and whatever. All right, then you lift up on that retaining shield once you get all the screws out. And it will come up. You also have there's a top fan cable you need to take off, which I've done. And then you can lift this plate up. Put your Wi-Fi antenna to the side. Okay, so we are almost to, this is the motherboard rather, but we are almost to the point where we can take it out. There are 2 screws right there and right there. They are holding in the bracket to keep the heat shield on the CPU, GPU on the other side. And also make a note. Don't make a note, just watch. See these little pads? Each one of them needs to go back exactly where they came from. They sit on those. And then they sit on the I believe those are RAM chips. You can correct me in the comments. But anyway, they are thermal pads. And you do want them on there. They do help dissipate heat. You can take that little weird thing out of there. And then all you got to do is take that last plug off of there. Yep, which is the power. Then you can lift the board up and out. This one's a little bit tricky. It sits pretty tight in there. But you can usually pull from the top, kind of like I'm doing. Oh, looks like I got it. All right, perfect. It is going to stick a little bit. You can see the thermal paste on there. That does stick, so you do have to give it a little bit of force to pull it out. And once you have, then you can put the console aside and get ready to replace the port. All right, there's the top of my head. So that is the HDMI port right there. It was not working, so we went ahead and are going to fix it. We're going to be replacing it with a brand new one. So once we get a little bit of focus, come on. It's okay, bear with me. We're going to be switching to our microscope camera here in a minute. That'll be a lot easier to see. So we flip the board over. We're looking at the back side of the HDMI, kind of. If we can get the focus on the camera right. We're almost there. Come on. Oh, you son of a gun. There we go. All right, in the middle, that is the HDMI port. To get it out of there, we need to get all those 4 legs sitting right next to it. We need to get those out of there. And then on the other side, there are a bunch of contacts as well. So the first thing I do is this is special heat tape. I am going to be using a hot air machine, a rework station. So I feel a lot more comfortable when I go ahead and put this heat tape so the other components near it do not get too hot or damaged. You don't have to do it, but it's just a peace of mind thing for me. So we're just sectioning off what we're actually going to be heating up, and then we will start the process of doing so. Alright, first thing you want to do is go ahead and take your soldering iron and start getting some solder on those legs. What is on there now is unleaded solder, which has a higher melting point, so we're actually just going to flow a bunch of leaded solder on there, which mixes with the unleaded and gives it a lower melting point, so we don't have to crank the hot air up for too long. Should have put some flux on it first. I didn't, but it's okay. It worked anyway. Okay, now we're under the microscope, and we are going to put some flux on there and get a really good bit of solder. Just have to flow it on there. You don't need too much, just enough. See the flux kind of walking around, just pooling out. That's fine. It's no clean flux. It's not going to hurt anything. I think this was with my soldering iron that didn't work very well, so I got a new one. Alright, so this is the other side of the HDMI port, and what I'm doing is just giving it some flux before I start heating up this side of the bottom side of the HDMI port. So we're going to go ahead and just heat the legs themselves, but also in the middle there you can see I'm going kind of like an X, because we need to heat up the actual legs, the actual connectors on the bottom side of the HDMI as well, which you can see there briefly. Yep, those are the little pins that we're going to be soldering to. We just unsoldered, or the last one just got unsoldered from. So you go through and you want to add some leaded solder and clean up those pads a little bit, because you want something for the new one to stick to properly. So you just add a little bit. Just go through, make sure you don't have any bridges. Yeah, there's one there, but I'll clean it up later. Oh, there's a big one. And you go through with your soldering wick and just clean it up, and you should be fine. Another way to do that is to just get a bigger tip and use that, and it'll actually pull those wicks, or those bridges out of there. Here I'm just going through with a little bit of a soldering wick. You want to go in the direction of the pad itself so you don't rip pads out, because otherwise that's bad news. Okay, so it looks like we got it pretty good. I'm happy with where we're at. So we're just kind of doing a last little maintenance, make sure all the pads look good. Like I said, we're under a microscope right now, digital microscope. So you can see it a lot better. Alright, so we flip it over again, and what we're going to do is actually go through and get that solder out of there. We want clean holes in there. We don't want any solder in them. So we've got our solder sucker, and we're sucking solder. Just do it a few times, depending on how much solder is in there. Just heat it up, suck it out. Heat it up, suck it out. Do that with all four. Always put your hot air away from other components like I'm doing. You see it's angled away from those little resistors or filters or whatever they are. All right, so that's pretty clean. You can see through all of our leg hole mounts. Just going through and making sure everything is perfect so we can actually lay that new. There we go. Even better view from that side. Okay, so now clean it up a little bit. Isopropyl alcohol, toothbrush. Clean it, make it look pretty. You don't have to do that, but you take pride in your work, so you're going to. Now the new HDMI port is ready to be put into place. So there he is. Pushed all the way in. Now your legs are going to go through the bottom of it, so you do need to kind of lift it off the surface you're on so it seats all the way down. This one does. And you can do this one of two ways. I actually on this one went through and soldered in each of the legs first, and then I went through and got the pins. Each of the pins on the new HDMI, I just went through and soldered them in with a little fine tip. And then I went through and scored up the legs themselves. You can do it either way. It probably makes more sense to do the legs first so it's sitting flush and all the way sturdy. And let's focus on the sucks. Okay, so what I'm doing now is just going, this is flipped upside down, and I'm soldering the legs in. And then I'm going to go back on the other side and make sure all my pins for the HDMI port to communicate with the board are soldered in properly. Yeah, sorry about the focus, but you get the gist. There we go. Back to better. So with these, you just want to fill them in. They're not very pretty right now. I will fix them later. All right, now I go through with a pair of tweezers and wiggle each one. If it wiggles, it's not soldered. So then I go through, find the ones that were not properly done, and I fix them. Might need to add a little bit of solder. But don't get too much, because then you will start getting bridges, and that's always a pain, especially if you have to go and use some wick in there. It's not a good deal. Just go through, make sure they're all soldered. All right, those were all soldered perfectly. So now we are going to reassemble. Watch those pads. They need to be one there, one there, one there. Should be 3 of them. And then we're going to put the board back in. I've already put the pads where they're supposed to be. They are a little bit sticky, so you can put them down on the chips themselves, or you can put them on the little nipples that are on the underside of the plate. It's easier to do it this way because when you're putting the plate on, sometimes they can move around and all that good stuff. I also put new thermal paste on the other side. So that is also important to do as well, because old thermal paste will not work. Any CPU thermal paste will work. All right, put your little retainer down in there, or spacer rather, and then you put the retainer down. It does bend upward, so as you go it kind of sucks each end down, and that makes it CPU sit very tight and pull that thermal paste down to it. just like a regular CPU cooler. All right, that's the last thing you need to do. Make sure your two connectors up top and then on the bottom for the power are in. The other ones you have to wait to put in until this plate is in place. So make sure you don't pinch them or get them stuck in there. And then you can put them all in. But you see the fan connector is already connected, and the one by the disc tray was connected before the plate went back on. All right, put your little connectors back in. That's the only one that has a retainer. Push it in as close to that little line. Each one has a little line. You push it in until it doesn't go anymore. And then you can start putting all your screws back in. Oh, and your Wi-Fi connection. We'll get to that in a minute. There it goes. It goes on that little nipple right there. I don't know what those are called. I keep calling them nipples. They're nipples. As far as I'm concerned, they're nipples. Maybe they're coax something. I don't know. Whatever. Okay, you marked all your screw holes, so you know exactly where everything goes. 3 different types of screws. Doesn't matter what order they go in. They also help sandwich everything in to dissipate heat properly, as well as the pads and all that stuff that we already put in. You can also use little colored sticky dealies, stickers to where those different screws go. I guess if you do enough of them, you just memorize it, but this is always easier to... Little preparation is worth a lot of whatever that saying is. All right, so we're putting all the rest of the screws in. Unfortunately, you have to do most of this for it to ground properly to even test your new HDMI port. You don't have to put all the screws in, but on this one I did. But it's kind of frustrating to have to do all that before you can actually test. So right about here, you could probably just hook it up and see if it works. All right, so final assembly is that top screw goes there, and then we've got our, and also if you are going to put it together and test it prematurely, make sure that grounding plate is back in, otherwise it will not work. All right, hard drive goes back in the side. Your little PlayStation specialty screw goes in there. Cleaned and polished. Get all the dust and blow all this stuff out while you're doing it, of course. That's only the right thing to do. Well, then you put that back together, top on, and then you have a brand new HDMI port on a console, and you win. So that's how you do it. Thank you so much for watching. Hope to see you again. Like, subscribe, and comment. I appreciate you. Love you.